Welcome to this Hard and Heavy special here on Monco Radio, where music and minds meet. I am your host, Danny Kukler here, and we have a treat for you today as I have Mark from Spectrum Pulse YouTube here to dissect whatever is going on in the music in 2020.
Oh, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we did this last year, and it was such a rousing success, we thought we'd do it again.
Yeah, and I'll say this, 2020, if there is a year to talk about, it is this one.
Yeah, it is this one to talk about. Let's start with the year-end Hot 100. Blinding Lights, not shockingly, taking the year-end number one spot. Did you think Circles had a shot at taking number one?
Not enough. Didn't have enough time at number one within the window. And its airplay, for as long as it had its run there, Blinding Lights became such a phenomenon for a larger period within the chart window. Not much was going to be breaking it.
Do you actually see it going beyond this year?
Probably not. I see it maybe going a little bit into 2021, but I also think that as soon as the Christmas music fades out and things kick into the winter gear, Blinding Lights is going to fade out more slowly. It's already on its way out in terms of radio airplay. It's going to take a slow exit, but it will be exiting.
It will exit probably after the Super Bowl.
Yep, probably.
When The Weeknd does his Super Bowl performance. What were your thoughts on the Grammy snub?
To me, I actually said a lot of this when I was on another podcast. To me, it was initially surprising in the initial thoughts that maybe The Weeknd just didn't submit any of his records for consideration. Turns out he did. My suspicion here is that given that Blinding Lights is much more of a pop record in comparison with his usual purview in R&B, that it may have been excluded or blunted in terms of nominations there. There might have been a genre conversation that surely goes well within the Grammys. But for him overall, I feel it kind of screwed him over. It's hard to look at anything but this year beyond him getting screwed over. And an ask of why probably comes down to a lot of industry politics and a lot of very unfortunate politics that, for as much as the Grammys have tried to curb their biases, this is just more evidence of it. Yeah,
it's really unfortunate, and it just the industry, rears its ugly head. Were there any shocks in the top 10? Maroon 5 getting number 8. I was like, good God.
Oh, it's annoying, and it gives you more credence to the fact that music discourse online is not reflective of music discourse to the vast majority of people. As much as we all might be sick of Maroon 5 in their most recent decade of cultural irrelevance, there's a whole lot of people outside of those who choose to speak for the culture who think Maroon 5 is plenty relevant, and we're going to hear them doing a shitty Bob Marley riff, and that's what's going to happen.
Yep, and it was just like the back end of this top 10 was really just bare bones.
But to be fair, let's be honest, a lot of these songs started in late 2019 and was rolling over to 2020,
right,
and basically ran on longevity. There's not much, a lot of stuff further down the list that was more catching the moment in terms of the spring or the summer. They didn't stick around that long. The turnover was so high.
Right. What was your thoughts on the turnover being so low in terms of Hot 100 number ones being dealt out so fast this year?
I actually have a controversial opinion on this because I've been brooding on this for a while. Because on the one hand, I feel like it's a little bit infuriating that you don't have a clear, defined set of songs that can define a year, and that the number one position is being used as labeled gamesmanship. Because it was a big thing for a long time that depending upon certain artists getting certain number ones in certain windows, they get added compensation coming back from their label. It's sort of like in a similar way to how when video game companies,
right,
they they work towards certain Metacritic scores because their employees' bonuses are tied into it. When Billboard is a glorified stat pad as it is, it felt like it was kind of even cheapening the stat pad to have so many people running with such obvious gimmicks to get there. The one thing I do appreciate, though, is that as Billboard did a thorough reckoning with their own formulas this year, the gimmicks started to fall away. They started to become a little less prevalent outside of a certain window. And I will say this, I don't mind the turnover that's so quickly. I think that keeps things fresh. I like that people were trying to make the Hot 100 relevant. It made my Billboard Breakdown series more relevant than it's ever been.
Right. And it sort of turned into, like, who's going to be number one next? It sort of turned into, like, who's going to be number one next? And it sort of turned into, like, this game of, like, one-upsmanship.
Oh, for sure. And there's a whole lot of intricate and frustrating label politics behind every single number one that goes to the chart. But I'm looking at the one that came before Mariah took it as of today. The previous one was Mood by 24K
right.
Golden and Dior. A song I actually happen to really, really like.
Yeah.
It also got there the old-fashioned way. It got there through a well-positioned radio run. Streaming got on board in a big way. Same with YouTube, same with sales. It was a balanced approach and proves that if artist development and the industry is focused in the right direction and just skips apart the entire gamesmanship process, you can get a sustainable number one. And to me, that matters a little bit more. I'll look at a song like, let's say, The Box, for instance, by Roddy Ricch. It got there off of a meme, but it felt like the groundswell was a lot more organic in comparison with some of the sales gamesmanship that put, Stuck With You by Ariana Grande and Justin Bieber to number one.
Yeah, or like a WAP did.
No, I actually completely disagree. I think WAP was a cultural phenomenon, and I think it got to number one mostly organically off of streaming. Yeah, the tricks were played with the video and with the very obvious baiting of controversy. But to me, it doesn't feel as cheap as when certain people use sales discounts at particular times.
Yeah.
Or rally stan armies. Or in the case of someone like Tekashi 69, goes to vent on Instagram, basically when he doesn't get number one, says, Billboard is rigged, cry harder. You got screwed over because Scooter Braun has a grudge against Lucian Grange. Get over yourself.
Yeah. And what was your whole position on the BTS phenomenon as is?
Complicated. I'll be very honest with that. It is complicated, and that's not because I have any fear of their stand-up. I have been very open surrounding what BTS songs work for me and which don't. I think Dynamite is one of their most cloying and obvious attempts at crossover that they've ever made. I wish Boy With Love had been the one to go to number one because, yeah, it had the crossover elements of the Halsey feature, but it was a much better song. It didn't feel so obviously loaded with buzzwords to drive up clicks in the
and
same way
forced.
that Dynamite was.
And forced, you know.
Yeah, it didn't feel like one of their songs. It didn't have the uniqueness that made them special in their own way. I do feel that the Stan push to drive up sales numbers with the infinite number of remixes, it's tired. I said this last year with Old Town Road because BTS was playing from the same playbook. But again, when you look into the breakdowns, the reason that Dynamite has not been as sustainable is because radio still has not fully gotten on board, and neither has streaming or YouTube outside of a specific window. Right. So they're playing the game a little better this year, but at the same time, it's not with better music. Right.
Were there any interesting stories outside the top, say, 20?
I think there's lots of interesting stories here. I'll go to the ones that immediately step out to me. I think there was a redemption arc for Lil Mosey with Blueberry Faygo becoming way more critically accepted than I'm surprised a lot of people got on board with it. I mean, for me, it falls in the same vein as Lil Tecca's Ransom, but the internet fell over themselves loving Blueberry Faygo, which kind of surprises me. I think the conversation surrounding Morgan Wallen and his rise in Nashville country is fascinating,
Yeah.
especially placed in contrast with Luke Combs. Luke Combs, who has built the Organics groundswell, is really being primed as the successor to a George Strait figure. And just with the consistency of his material and his hits, especially as it trends a lot more towards neo-traditional material, I think his success this year has been generally a win, and a lot of his songs charting this year have been great. Whereas with Morgan Wallen, you get the TikTok crossover that came with Seven Summers. And while I think he is going to be a presence in the scene, I wonder how much longer it will last, or whether or not he's got enough groundswell behind him, especially with some of his own antics outside of this.
Right.
Go a little bit further. We don't all have good stories. Black Eyed Peas came back.
Yeah. Don't even remind me of that. With some of the lyrics.
Well, it's cheap. I think it's a very cheap attempt to go for the marketing. But again, it's will.i.am. We've known this since the 2000s in terms of how he positions his songs to be more for their market-tested presence in crossover and relying on people not getting his plan. And I think to the benefit of most people, a lot of people haven't understood what he's doing. We saw I keep wanting to say flame out of Justin Bieber, but he keeps charting.
Oh yeah! Oh my God! It really sort of boggles my mind that this hasn't flamed out the way it should.
Well, I think a lot of us came up in the era where Justin Bieber was just universally hated online, and he's tried to frame so many different redemption arcs that I'm almost losing track of which one he's on. At this particular point, it's just kind of obnoxious in terms of how he is specifically sidling into a quasi-Christian music framing of some of his art in terms of his redemption. To me, it feels very plastic and very phony. Not to disparage anyone's faith, as apparently his is very real, but it does not convey very well in his art. And then I honestly say the most uncomfortable thing I noticed with the charts this year...
Juice WRLD.
Well, it's not just Juice WRLD, it's the posthumous entries. There's a lot of them.
Yep.
Pop Smoke being the big one.
Yeah, Pop Smoke being the big one. And a lot of Juice WRLD entries as well.
Honestly, the sad thing is that both albums... I'll be honest, I'm not really a huge fan of either artist at any point in their career. I've been pretty vocal about it. But I find it genuinely sad that both of them were reaching some point of artistic momentum where I could see development, and then both of them were taken from us way too early. And the shadows loom over a lot of their sound in rap and trap music this year.
It just seems to be amazing how it's speechless, honestly.
It doesn't surprise me. Again, I've always believed that hip-hop is more in touch with the cultural commentary in terms of the culture at large, especially of youth. It does not surprise me in 2020 that posthumous artists have dominated in the same way. Dominated even feels like the wrong word to use. It's very deeply sad.
Right. Let's go to the world of rock where I'm more familiar with. Let's start with the alternative airplay list.
I'm looking at this chart. Can you define to me what alternative is?
No, I really can't. And like when me and my friend Andrew go through sometimes we'll go through the weekly charts and listen to the alternative songs. We find a consistent thing. Funky bass.
That's a trend.
A trend.
That's a trend. And even then, the new wave relic in the bass line, AJR does not have that.
Oh, no.
That.
Yeah.
I won't even think 21 Pilots, the Hype was a hit on the charts, which is great. The Hype is an amazing song. But I'm a little bit surprised it did as well as it did on the alternative charts.
Yeah. I follow these things, and I'm like, I know All Time Low, Monsters was number one for like a really long time.
Okay.
These songs were like number one for like a while. Billie Eilish was number one for a while. Bang, of course, because they run to AJR.
That's surprising to me. I would think that alternative music would see AJR as a little bit too plastic.
That's what but they've sort of embraced it.
See, like, I'm not even going to say the alternative airplay charts were bad here. I'm looking at some of these, and some of these songs are good. The Hype I like a lot. Machine Gun Kelly's Bloody Valentine, that should be charting mainstream. I think that song is fantastic. Both Killers songs are excellent. They push great singles there.
Yeah.
I have no idea why anyone's still on board with AWOL Nation. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's a different conversation.
Yep.
I had the full list.
Billie Eilish had All Good Girls Go to Hell. That fact that it made charting on the alternatives charts, that actually is impressive to me. And 1975, You're Too Shy, Let Me Know, that was a fantastic single. And that's another song I wish was pushed to pop radio.
Yeah. Yeah, I sort of wish that was pushed to pop radio. I really liked the Kenny Hoopla song that John liked. From ARTV, How Will I Rest in Peace If I'm Buried on a Highway. The Juice WRLD Marshmallow song, I know.
It's there because of guitars. It's not there because it really fits from either artist. And again, it raises the question again, what alternative even can be classified here as, like, somehow Blue October is on this list.
Yeah, I can actually show you the full list.
I've got it on a side panel. I'm looking at it, and it's interesting.
And, it's really interesting. I can actually show you the actual top 150.
Oh my gosh!
150, 165 songs charted.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me. Again, a lot of these feel like. Oh, the one thing I'm noticing here is that there's a little bit more variety. I do see there actually being some turnover when it comes to artist and songs. There's no one artist that is dominant here. There's a couple of older names, but the older names were putting out mostly quality. And there's some up-and-coming names. There are names that are considered a little more up-and-coming. I'll say this for alternative radio, even despite if the genre is a total mess, there is stuff here that is respectable.
Yeah. I'm not going to defend mainstream rock. I'm not here to defend mainstream rock because that list, when we get to it.
I'm looking at it right now. The one thing, I was talking about this with a couple of my buddies, and the one comment that we came out with mainstream rock, it's not even that these songs are bad, it's that they're irrelevant. It's
irrelevant. That
mainstream rock is not part of the cultural conversation in a way that it used to be in the 2000s or even chunks of the 2010s. Five Finger Death Punch is up in the top 5 twice. I'm going to say it, even if Fate did well or did better, as it was considered marginally better by the fan base, outside of mainstream rock, nobody cares. There's no one acts on this list where people really even cared that much, and that's more worrisome.
The only act I could see that people really care about, and I hate to say it, is Falling in Reverse. It's because Ronnie Radke has a presence on Twitch.
Well, Ronnie Radke has a presence, but at the same time, he's not to the point where he is going to be mentioned in any year-end list in terms of any music critic discussion that does not specifically target mainstream rock. The one person I'd say is Ozzy, because he had his final album this year. That's how it was a lot of frame. And he had some success there, despite being pretty much just an Ozzy album. And then we have the Green Day
debacle. Let's just call it what it was.
I don't even think that album is bad. I just call it a Foxborough Hot Tubs, a project in that lane, and it probably didn't receive a lot better.
Yeah.
But why is Bush here? Why is Bush still charting?
The song's actually pretty good too. I'm actually. I don't.
The also-rans of grunge from the 90s are now producing stuff that is considered pretty good with respect to mainstream rock. That worries me.
Yeah, it does worry you, and it worries me too, because I'm just like, like, honestly, when Theory of a Dead Man's number 12 with that god awful.
Yeah. I know what Theory of a Dead Man we're doing here. I'm not going to be as harsh as some of my colleagues because I didn't review the album, and I have a good reason for it because I haven't liked Theory of a Dead Man in 10 years, at least. But my point with that is that they were trying to be topical, and it paid off for them in success, if not in quality, which happens. That I can point to Coldplay as trying to do something similar on the alternative charts.
Right, and getting a Grammy nomination for it.
Yeah, that's true.
And the only artist I could see doing something, I don't know, like, what your thoughts are about it, is Fire from the Gods.
No, I agree with you. I think that's the one that immediately jumps out as Fire from the Gods has a lot of potential going forward. I've never been huge into their sound, but I think in terms of upward potential, I see a lot that people have gravitated to, and I have a lot of friends who speak very highly of them. I'll also even go to Deftones with Ohms.
Deftones.
The album was not for me, and I've completely accepted that, and it has been a bit of a polarizing release, but for the fans, it kind of gave them a change up in sound, so I'm not going to deny that it might belong here.
Right.
I am a little bit amused that Pearl Jam is still charting with Super Blood Wolf Moon. Like, that was funny to
me. Pearl Jam on my active rock station, here in Philadelphia. I live in Philadelphia, so we're the third biggest active rock station in the country, because New York doesn't have an active rock station. Chicago is the biggest media market that has an active rock station. So, and then it's Dallas, then it's Philadelphia.
Okay.
They run to like Bruce Springsteen and Pearl Jam and any classic art. But they do play some interesting stuff like Des Rocks and Loca Connie.
I'm not going to deny that the occasional market's going to throw something more interesting onto the list. I will say, though, for the consolidated radio system at large, especially on mainstream rock, if anyone is looking at that list, they're probably saying, if they're not saying we are in trouble, then they need to get their head out of their ass.
Yeah.
There is, what I'm seeing and looking at that list isn't just irrelevance. I'm seeing decay. I am seeing something that in 2 to 3 years, not even 5, I see drawing less of a crowd. Not being as sustainable or forward-thinking as it needs to be. And you know what? I'll say this. I think I mentioned this last year when we were talking about the alternative. I mentioned that rock music, specifically mainstream rock, should embrace more groove sections. Well, The alternative charts kind of did that, and they wound up better for it.
Right. I sort of agree with that. Yep.
Now, I'm looking at the list of the albums and EPs you enjoyed here. We have some overlap here, more than I was expecting.
Yeah. Yep. Let's bring it up. Bring Me the Horizon. I know we don't agree on that one.
You know what? Bring Me the Horizon for me is one where I am so outside of the target demographic and so outside in terms of my taste. For me, they're just overproduced. I find their sound very overblown. It doesn't do anything for me.
But I see but that's a band I see being played on mainstream rock that has some excitement going on.
For sure. I actually think that in terms of the amount of experimentation they still do, I give them a lot of credit for it, and I hope that leads them to further success down the line. Even if I don't particularly like post-human survival horror, I'm not against it being here. And you know, a similar thing with Code Orange, like with Underneath. Again, I think that album is not as good as Forever. But
no, I didn't think it was as good as Forever either. I didn't think it was as good as Forever, but at the same time, it was still pretty good. Creepers, Sex of Death, and the Infinite Void.
That album's getting slept on. I think.
Oh yeah, I think that should have gotten more play. Oh my god.
Well, it's not going to get play. I think that Creeper, as much as I respect the marketing for faking breaking up and then coming back, I think they kind of killed their hype outside of their very specific niche. And the fact that they came back with such a change in sound. A change in sound, for me, I think is an improvement because it gives them so much more versatility. But it's not an album I see having the crossover they would want, per se. Even if I think the album is excellent.
Yeah. I could see that. Deftones, Ohms.
Again, ambivalent. It's not the Deftones albums that I like. I'm not the biggest Deftones fan as it is. I'm not going to complain that it's there, though. I get why Deftones works. It's similar to how I felt about the Slipknot album from last year. It's not for me, but I get it.
Hayley Williams, Pedals for Armor.
Terribly marketed. Her label, everyone involved with the marketing of that album should be fired into the sun.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think promoters behind that completely screwed her over. And the shame with that is that the album's okay. I don't think it's great by any means. I think it's a little underproduced. I think there's elements. I think it meanders, especially on its back half. I think Hayley Williams is not quite as interesting of a writer as I wish she was. But again, this was an album that was kind of killed in the crib by its promotion. I think those who have heard it really like it, and I get why. Right.
I liked it. I didn't love it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's an album that's easy to like, but I think if you're not a Hayley Williams stan, you're not going to love it.
Right. IDK How, Razzmatazz.
God, I wish this was more interesting and appealing.
Yeah, I could see how you have that opinion.
To me, it reminds me of good Panic at the Disco, and given that I don't expect her ever to get good Panic at the Disco again, I'm not going to complain they exist, but it's a sound that has been so played out over the past 15 years, especially if you listen to a lot of pop rock in that lane. I really wish it felt more original, especially with the stylism they were trying to embrace. It was not as groundbreaking for me as someone who has heard, I don't know, the first 3 Panic at the Disco
records. Yep. Idols, Ultramono.
Got way too much crap. A lot of people think it's their worst album. I'm inclined to agree. It's still great. I think the lyrics are a little more dumbed down. I agree with that, but I don't think they're anywhere near as bad as some particularly bad political albums I've heard and have to review this year. I think ultimately Idols' formula is so strong that they're going to be a consistent presence, and I like that. I really, really hate how some overblown scene drama got picked up and ran with by some particularly irresponsible music journalists who have had an axe to grind with Idols for a little too long. And those music journalists know who they are.
Boy, did Grandson's album age poorly. Oh.
You know what? I thought about that review a lot. I was extremely harsh on that album. I don't think it's good at all. I think to some extent he was kind of screwed. He was screwed by the election going not towards Trump but towards Biden. He was clearly planning on something different. And the fact that the way that it played out the past month, he kind of got screwed by it in a similar way that Common got screwed by when Trump won the election in 2016 with Black America Again. I think that album had a lot of potential, but he clearly was expecting Hillary to win that election. And in contrast, the album did not fade out all that well.
Yep. Marilyn Manson, We Are Chaos.
Don't care. Marilyn Manson hasn't been relevant or interesting in
Yep.
20 years.
Yeah.
I industrial music go to an act like Seeming. They put out an album called The Birdwatcher's Guide to Atrocity.
Ooh.
I honestly think that it's one of the best finds I've found on Bandcamp in recent memory. Super interesting, super industrial, but with a pop edge. The hooks are fantastic. The song I'd like to highlight is called Go Small. Look it up. It's really decent.
Seeming, you said?
Yeah. Seeming, yes.
Okay, I will look it up. I looked up The Spirit of Drift last year, and I didn't regret that. I listened to their album this year, and boy, that was a good.
Right.
That was a good. It was all right, but their albums previous was very good.
Yeah.
Movement, no good left to give.
Man, I wish all the hype that went to this band had gone to Loud Dispute last year.
Yeah, that's sort of it. Yeah.
Because it's the same template, it's the same formula. I just think Loud Dispute does all of that post-hardcore sound in a way more interesting manner. I'm not even against Movements. I thought the album was good, but it didn't stick with me. And we'll get into the other album I think we can bucket into a similar territory with this later on the list.
Yep. Oh, I know what album you're talking about. Let's just touch on it right now. Touche Amore Lament.
I'm not actually talking about Touche Amore at all. Touche Amore Lament is excellent. I think they went more pop. I think that he was a great fit for them. It was the loaded blast of additional hooks I think really helped them. I love the integration of pedal steel on that album. It comes across as really fresh for them. It expands their sound. If this is a breakthrough for them, I would be thrilled to hear it.
Right. Let's go to your album of the year. It's Spanish Love Song, Brave Faces, everyone. I love this album.
What a surprise. I'm so happy this album has caught more traction, seemingly with music critics and music journalists. The ones outside of a few, everyone who I've seen who has heard this loves it. It's already making a bunch of lists. I think it's going to be a sleeper hit that will come up outside of the larger critical establishment. And I'm not one to call something a classic early, but I can see this as being a cult favorite among those who were there. I can see this one having that power, having that moment in like 4 or 5 years when people will go back and say, "Oh yeah, Midwestern emo was a thing. That Spanish Love Songs album was so great." And yeah, for me, it is my album of the year, and I'm not sure I can formulate an argument against it.
Yeah. When you watch Mark's review of it, it's so glowing and loving.
Well, to me, it was one of those albums. I went looking for flaws and I couldn't find them. I think for its fusion of pop rock, pop punk, and emo is so well crafted and so well written and so undeniably visceral that it almost feels too real for 2020. But now as 2020 ends, it feels perfect for the year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It hits more home now than ever before.
Yep.
Ozzy Osbourne, Ordinary Man.
Ozzy album. I'm not going to complain about it. It was there to serve the fan base. It's not a bad note for him to go out on if he's looking to retire.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad note to go out on. I think I think that song with Elton John was really good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in terms of Piano Foundation, that was a good song. That was a good crossover as two elder statesmen in their genres.
Yeah. Phoebe Bridgers, Punisher.
Man, I wish I loved this as much as everyone else did. I put this in the same category as the Waxahachie album that dropped earlier. I think it's solid. I think the writing is very good. I think some of the atmosphere is good. I'm not at all sold on the more upbeat songs. I don't think Phoebe Bridgers could sell them. But at the same time, if you're defaulting to Punisher, that tells me a lot about the indie folk and indie country and the depth of which you listened to this year. Because indie country had a banner year, and if you know, you know. But there's a lot of people going to the Phoebe Bridgers or the Waxahachie album as their best in that lane have not heard enough that came out in that lane. Even if I do think Chinese Satellite from Punisher is excellent.
Poppy, I disagree.
Wanted this to be way better than it was. I think the pop metal fusion has a lot of potential. To me, I've heard a lot of pop metal before because I'm a Devin Townsend fan.
Yeah.
And to me, I disagree, was transitional. It's the start of a really good sound, kind of building off what she had on Am I a Girl back in 2018. I want to see if she continues down in this lane. And the crossover she's doing with Youngblood, not bad. Same with stuff with Fever 333. I'm not going to complain about it. Be the doobie.
Be the doobie. Bacon Flowers.
Very much in the vein of a retro 90s revival. I put her in the same category as Soccer Mommy a lot of the time in terms of this particular sound. Vagabond's doing stuff similar. I'm not against the 90s revival, especially in this brand of alt rock and indie rock. Ashton Irwin, the drummer of 5 Seconds of Summer, put out an album called Super Bloom, which is basically a love letter to early Oasis and Soundgarden in like 1994, and it's great. Be a Doobie, I don't think quite rises to that level, but I admit part of that is I don't love that era of 90s rock in the same way. And I found that the sound kind of started meandering, getting a little washed out, a little overwhelmed by its influences.
Dua Lipa, a person we didn't talk about during the Hot 100 section, Future Nostalgia.
I didn't love Future Nostalgia as much as everyone else did. I think it's a bit of a lateral move coming off her self-titled album in 2017, which I was on board with, and everyone else was just now rushing to catch up and overpraising Future Nostalgia. I think the writing still needs to take another step. I think her sound is a little obviously derivative from the indie scene, which does bug me a little bit because I think Dua Lipa has the production budget to make something a little bit better. I think she's a tremendous presence in pop. I'm happy she's doing really well here. And she's great live, too, from what I've seen her. So I think she's got a big future. I'm happy this album did well. I'm not saying she's made a great album just yet. She's close, but she's getting there.
Fiona Apple, Fetch the Bolt Cutters.
The album Pitchfork salivated over furiously. I was about to use a much more nasty word. I think Vegetable Cutters is great. I think it's an album that did exactly what it needed to do at the time it was needed to do. I think there's songs on it that are among some of the best of the year. I think it's a little scattered. I think it's a little oddly produced in spots, but I understand why it's as great as it is. It's one of my. It's going to be on my list of my favorite albums of the year.
RTJ4.
Not as good as RTJ 2 or 3. I think Run the Jewels kind of might want to switch it up a bit. I think the sound in which they are embracing is starting to get a little played out in terms of what to expect from them, which is not a bad thing. It's a great formula. It's still one of the best hip-hop albums of the year. It's going to make my list, too. But I know I have a high standard for this group, and when the past 3 Run the Jewels albums are among the best albums of the last decade, I would struggle a bit to put this in a similar tier. I think this is an album that hit a specific note given the controversy and the societal upheaval in June of this year, which is not a bad thing. For the record, I think you need music for those specific times, and I absolutely think this resonated at the right moment. I question how long that resonance will hold beyond the summer of 2020. I still think it's great. I still think it's very well written. I still think it's one of the best albums of the year, but it's not their best.
Folklore.
I'm viewing it better having heard Evermore, which is her newest album that she put out on Friday.
Right.
I don't think Folklore is bad at all. I think it's probably her second best album behind Speak Now. I think the writing is very good. I think it's way too long. Again, it's very beholden to her influences, to the surprise of nobody. I kind of wish it had a little bit more of the originality that came through on Lover. I think it does have some of her best ever songs, and I will give Taylor Swift a lot of credit. I do question releasing Evermore in late, mid-December, though, because I think that album does not have the same sense of atmosphere as Folklore has, and I think that kind of does the two of them a little bit of a disservice. I still think it's good, but it's not great, and I'm more secure on that now.
Chris Stapleton, Starting Over.
Perfectly fine. It's probably his best album to date. Best album to date, with the respect that the From A Room Volume 2 was an EP. I think Chris Stapleton is making just extremely solid country music. But if you're going to Chris Stapleton as your best of country, you need to go deeper, because you're in a year with Rustin Kelly, American Aquarium, Jason Isbell, Katie Pruitt, Juliet McConkie. There is so many other names I can circle around in terms of the banner year country had for 2020. I can keep going. We can go with Ward Davis. You can go with Gabe Lee, if I haven't already mentioned him. There is so many artists I would put in the conversation before Chris Stapleton right now. So even if I think that album is great, is it among the best of the year? No. Is it probably going to make my year-end list? Doubtful. I got to be honest.
Fontaine's DC. I think this was the album you were talking about earlier. A Hero's Death.
Yep, exactly. No, it is exactly the same. I put this in the same category as Movements. It is very meat and potatoes of the genre. It's someone who does not listen to post-punk on a regular basis. This is the post-punk album they will gravitate to. I put it in a similar category as Proto-Martyr, in that I think it's very solid, but I don't think it's great, especially in the same year you had Special Interest, who dropped The Passion Of, and that album is phenomenal. I think it's fine. It is perfectly fine post-punk. It is way too indebted to its influences, but I'm not going to complain about it.
I wanted to add one more. Destroyer. The
Destroyer album is an album that sneaks up on me. Have We Met is one of those projects I think did what Ken was trying to do, and it does it maybe a bit better. But I think a lot of people will consider it better because Have We Met is a lot more immediate in terms of its sound, where Ken was much more abrasive and pushing people away. It worked for me in 2017, but I understand how it wouldn't for a lot of people. Have We Met is an album I put on, and I love it whenever I put it on, but it's an album that is so easy to forget. It will slip out of a lot of people's minds, and that's kind of a shame, because I think it's deserving better, especially with how good the writing is.
The Weeknd, After Hours.
Best thing he's made since Thursday and Echoes of Silence. Not great as of yet. I don't think he's topped his best work, but I will say that Heartless Faith and Blinding Lights are one of the best 3-song runs you're going to hear this year.
And then the last of the albums I enjoyed, Pearl Jam, Gigaton.
Gigaton's interesting. It's too long. It doesn't know what it's doing across a large chunk of the back half, but it showed more ideas. It felt more fresh for Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam will go on bouts where they will experiment. I'm not going to disparage them for that, but I don't think this is one of their experiments that worked. I'll still admit I like Lightning Bolt more.
Yeah, I figured I like Lightning Bolt more too. But I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed my time with it, even though it's a little too long. Interesting albums. We go to the interesting albums next. And Mark,
can you open up Lady Gaga's Chromatica?
It was interesting, but Lady Gaga's Chromatica. What do you want to say?
To me, it is the definition of playing it safe.
Like the Katy Perry album.
The definition of safe is still quality. I still think the album has quality behind it, but man, it felt very draining to go through. and realize that just so much color has been lost since the Fame Monster, or even Born This Way.
Yeah. I just did it because Lady Gaga's in the name.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
That's why BTS is here next.
That's why BTS is here next. Map with the Soul 7.
I already talked a little bit about BTS. I think Map of the Soul 7 is good. It's not great. It's not their best work by any means. It's very clearly being planned for mainstream crossover. Like a lot of BTS projects, it's too long. It meanders. It doesn't have anywhere near the tightness or production quality a band of this popularity should. But I get why they've got the following they do.
Halsey, manic.
God, this was a mess. I made a prediction back in 2018 that Halsey's third album would be her most experimental, but would also be one that would flop. I don't want to say I was right here, because I think she had a little more single success, thanks to Without Me being tacked onto the middle of the project. But if you look at Manic and not think, oh, this underperformed a little bit, that it wasn't the breakthrough I think she was hoping for, I think there's something close to that, especially when I think the most interesting passage on that project came from the Alanis Morissette interlude, and especially because Alanis Morissette put out an album this year that was great.
Oh, I did forget about that.
Yeah, Such Pretty Forks in the Road. It came out in the middle of the summer. I covered it the same week as Creeper. It went slept on by a lot of people, but if you like that piano-driven adult alternative that's very indebted to the 90s and a bit of Tori Amos, you'll love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you covering that, actually. Joji, Nectar.
Too long, but I think everyone agrees that project is too long. I think there's a couple fantastic songs in the midsection, but it's a project that is bloated and doesn't do enough to flatter the elements that make Joji special. And that kind of stings, because I was hoping this would be his breakthrough, and it didn't quite turn out like it was.
I think Run's a fantastic song.
I agree, and I think Sanctuary might be even better.
Machine Gun Kelly. Tickets to My Downfall. Oh.
You know what? I think I'm going to be right on this one longer term, because I think there's a lot of critics right out the gate who hate Machine Gun Kelly for being that rap guy who goes into pop punk, and it's such a clearly cynical marketing move. And he can't sing that well. We all know this. He's barely competent on guitar. He's clearly backed up with the support of the industry and Travis Barker specifically behind him. It's clear a lot of his content is asinine. But I bet in 5 years, this is an album that's going to be lauded by a lot of kids by saying this was the rap pop punk fusion that got me into the genre. And there's a part of me that can't deny how great the hooks are. This is an album that is way better produced and way punchier than it has any right to be. It should be way worse than it is, and I think maybe I'm going to be wrong here, but if Machine Gun Kelly doesn't do anything profoundly stupid, I think people are going to circle around on this one.
Yeah, I think I didn't think it was nearly as bad as everyone else thought.
Yeah, well, again, it's going to be interesting. I think a lot of people were expecting this to be, oh my god, a lot of people say it was super derivative, and I'm like, okay, did you hear like Front Bottoms? There's a lot of pop punk this year I found was unbelievably generic and derivative. And if you're going to crap on an act for being derivative, there's a whole lot of acts on your mainstream rock chart you need to retire.
5-Finger Death Punch. Godsmack.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
God. Like, if I never hear a Godsmack song again or Stained, I would be inglorious. Youngblood, weird.
this more than I thought I would. I still don't think it's very good because I think the production hurts him. And I think, again, like Machine Gun Kelly, he's a bit of a studio product backed up by better than average like session musicians and production behind him. And the writing is sadly not very interesting. But he's a frontman with a lot of personality. I'm not going to hate anyone who likes this album. I think it's fine.
Now we get to the embarrassingly bad one. Justin Bieber changes.
You know what? It's not even embarrassing for me because I knew he was this bad. Like, again, it feels like a bit of shouting at the wall here when it comes to Bieber being such a flat presence as a performer. Nothing on this album was surprising to me, and that might have been the real ultimate downfall of it in terms of that it's so milquetoast, boring, underproduced, poorly delivered, especially for what he was trying to do with a trap R&B mold. It is so utterly barren of greater ideas. It is genuinely disappointing that anyone thinks this album is good, but it's getting attention. So it's not the worst album of the year. I can say that for certain. But
what's the worst album of the year?
Album that I think there's going to be people who come back around to this and like, what were we thinking? Like giving this guy more runway.
What's the worst album of the year in your opinion?
Sam Hunt's Southside.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot to put that down. Oh.
You don't need to. You
don't
need to. There are worse albums than Justin Bieber in 2020, and they aren't worth giving more attention.
No. That Sam Hunt is offensive to everyone. So
yeah, and if you're looking for a project that is emblematic of the industry, giving someone who is not worth it too many chances, it is Sam Hunt. I'd say the same thing for Bieber, but you know what? At least Bieber had a record of being successful. And Sam Hunt's record was starting to dry up after he had his one massive song in 2017, which is included on the new album.
Oh. Yuck. Shawn Mendes, Wonder. I watched that review.
Yeah, I am still conflicted on this because it doesn't work at all, but the album is fascinating to me. It sounds like somebody tried to make an album that came out in 78, 79, doing the soft rock thing with a little bit of the disco, but trying to blow itself up to arena rock proportions because Shawn Mendes is doing arenas now, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. The content doesn't back it up. Shawn Mendes' performance does not back it up. It feels way too small and thin to really get there, especially in the groove passages. And it's really so obvious how derivative he is of Harry Styles. And that to me kind of bugs me.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of Harry Styles, his album was great. Just saying.
His album was good. It came out in 2019. I thought the album was fine. I think it had more staying power than a lot of people gave him. That I personally gave him credit initially. So I'll give him points for that. I wish the album was interesting, and I wish Niall Horan, his former bandmate in One Direction, got nearly as much of attention because that album, Heartbreak Weather, was a considerable improvement on his debut, and I think Heartbreak Weather is a great project, and I think it's criminally underrated.
And then Glass Animals Dreamland.
Oh, Jesus. This one is ugly because this was one of those reviews where I was negative in a similar vein as a fellow critic that we all know.
Fantano.
Yeah. The problem with this is that I was never huge on Glass Animals anyway, going back to their 2016 album.
Right.
So going to this, it's a bad album. I will say that. I think a lot of musical ideas are half-baked and clearly ripped off from a lot of the alternative charts. It feels like somebody was trying to synthesize a very specific alternative sound, but, just the generic alternative branding that would play very well at a festival and nowhere else. And when the content is so openly nostalgic, but delivered with such a weird, uncomfortable gooiness, that it just does not sit on the palate well. It's one of those albums that I think would make sense if you're doing a lot of mushrooms, but since I don't do mushrooms, like it's one of those projects I don't see the appeal. To me, I think that I wasn't even crazy with the Tame Impala album from this year, but I take that over this.
Or the Strokes album.
The Strokes album
was
an
boring.
album that really needs a front man who can sing falsetto.
Oh my God.
No, this is something that I have been echoed with a couple other critics. I think the New Abnormal soured on me in record time. I don't think it's all that distinctive or memorable. It's nowhere close to their best work. I'll be honest, I like parts of Come Down Machine more than I like the New Abnormal. I think at least Come Down Machine had a couple songs that had some kick to them. This does not. It feels more experimental, but all the experiments hit on bum notes for me. And Julian Casablancas, I've never heard someone who sounds so trying to be engaged, but in reality disengaged on the microphone.
Right.
Like he's clearly trying to be there for the band. Albert Hammond Jr. is talking about how much more the collaboration process was there, but you can tell that Julian Casablancas wants to be going back with the Voids and doing anything else.
So, albums for 2021. We look forward.
Okay, let me take a look here.
Let's see if anything interesting. Oh God.
The Morgan Wallen double album is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to wind up covering it because I do need to say something about this guy's hype machine because it's going to be fascinating. New Steven Wilson at the end of the month. I'm excited for Steven Wilson continuing down in his prog pop rock direction, especially after that Blackfield album he did this year was just completely dull as hell. I'm hoping he refocused here. What's your thoughts on the new Foo Fighters coming?
Shame. It grew on me.
Oh, that's good.
It grew on me. At first, I was like, "What the hell is this?" And then I'm like, I'm dancing to it. And then I'm like, shame. I'm like singing the song.
Well, if it works for somebody, have fun with it. To me, it just, I am worried about that album. I'll be honest.
I'm a little worried. If it's all gonna be slow burners, I'm a little worried.
Looking else here,
Pretty Reckless.
Line, barf. Yeah, the lineup. I'm not seeing a lot here that really jumps off the page. I'll be honest. I've stopped listening to Alice Cooper a long time ago.
Oh God.
New Epica could be really good because it's been 4 years since their last album. I really hope they came together with something stronger. Like I think that in terms of symphonic metal bands, given how disappointing Nightwish was this year.
Oh God, Nightwish was so disappointing. That was.
You know what? It's the part of me that's saying the Floor Jansen years are not working, and that breaks my heart because I think she's a great singer. I've loved what she did with Arion, but I think the compositions are getting away from them, and Marco's lack of screaming or shouting, his more bellicose, raw vocals. Without that contrast, it really hurts them. And I think Nightwish is just they've lost me in a way that just breaks my heart. They were a band I grew up with.
Architects looks interesting.
Architects I've never had the chance to really get into. I'm excited. I will probably cover that. I am excited to see what that turns out to be.
It looks like a new direction for them, which I'm liking the new direction. No more, but still very powerful vocals.
Yeah. I'm looking down at March here. I'm seeing a day to remember.
Oh God. Can we not
stay dropping in March? I doubt it will, given how troubled that process has been to release that album.
They released like 15 singles from that album.
If that album is not being chopped to ribbons and repackaged in some form to make it vaguely sellable, it's either going to come out a bloated nightmare or it's going to come down with 8 tracks and 2 of them and only 3 of them you've heard before at most. that to me seems like an album from hell. I kind of think the same thing about the new Evanescence.
Oh,
I'm not
yeah,
a fan of Evanescence at all, but something about that is saying, uh-oh, and I don't like when I have that uh-oh feeling.
Have you heard the song?
I've heard a few of them.
Have you heard the
fan.
Use My Voice song?
Yeah,
that song's cringe. The Van Weezer thing, I'm like, uh-oh. I'll believe it when it happens.
The one that I think might attract more attention is the Greta Van Fleet project that's dropping in April. That, to me, is interesting. If only because I was hard on the first Greta Van Fleet album as being a pretty shameless Led Zeppelin clone, but missing all of Led Zeppelin's teeth.
Right.
But if they change things up on their sophomore album, I am prepared to give them that chance because, again, Rush sounded very much in the vein of very much in the vein of Led Zeppelin starting out, and then they really switched things up and they turned into a really good band. So if Greta Van Fleet does their own form of change-up, that could be really cool. We'll just have to see if it happens.
I don't think that's going to happen. I heard the single.
You know what? They probably need the single to make sure mainstream rock radio is satisfied. But again, a lot of the singles leading up to the first Greta Van Fleet album did not really reflect what that anthem of a Peaceful Army was.
Right. True.
The one thing we're not seeing here, there it is, Drake, Certified Lover Boy.
Oh, God. No. It's to be announced in January.
Here's my thinking on this. That album is going to come out because I think that album is primed for 2021. We can also expect a Kendrick Lamar album at some point in 2020. At some point in 2021, especially if touring reopens.
Right.
The one thing I think with that Drake album, I've been saying that Drake's career has been over since, I want to say 27. I would say Views. I think his career has been on the downswing. I keep being proven wrong with as many charting singles as he gets. There's something about the Certified Lover Boy run that's reminding me of Views, and I'm not sure if this is going to have the sticking power he wants. He's nearly been a decade in the game. I think a lot of people love him, but Laugh Now, Cry Later did not go to number one, and that to me says a lot.
Yeah, and his number one single this year is a TikTok thing.
Yeah, the Tootsie Slide thing. And that was tied in with the package of Lucy's, and most of those Lucy's stank. So, again, I'll quote a fellow music critic, Mike the Snare. He basically just laughed and said, "Trash."
Yep.
Not wrong.
Yep. Do you see any of the unscheduled ones that are interesting? Ghost will
be cool. That Lana Del Rey album looks to be excruciating.
Oh God, I'm not ready for it because I on my album of the year you know the side album of the year, right?
Yeah.
I bodied that album. The Norman effing Rockwell. I bodied it. I was like, this is some of the most boring stuff I've heard. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Well, again, it's going to be one of those projects that if it drops, I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about it, which could be better for worse. But I'm seeing, in terms of better stuff that I'm excited about, New Bleachers, he had Jack Antonoff had a song with Bruce Springsteen this year.
I did not like that song.
I'm kind of on the fence about it. I get what he's doing with it. We'll see where he goes with it.
Bruce's vocal sounded watery in that.
Yeah, but that's I wasn't surprised by that. I think Bruce's vocals need to be produced in a certain way. Well, it's the same thing when Jack Antonoff has recruited artists to be on remixes of his stuff. The artists don't always sound as good as they should.
Right.
Outside of that, though,
Royal Blood.
That could be good. I hope it is.
I hope the new Royal Blood's good.
I'm not a huge Royal Blood fan, but if you're into that, I hope that's good. The new FKH Wakes, I hope that's good. 2,4K
Golden, that could be something.
Yeah, you're right. The new Liz Phair, is that confirmed that that's actually coming out?
I don't even know. 78. Least favorite signs of Crystal was it was an article on September 29th.
I'm not sure that's coming. That I will believe when I've heard. The one that worries me, and because I think the discourse among it is going to be terrible, the new Megadeth album.
Oh, good grief.
I'm not a Megadeth fan by any means, mostly because I'm not a huge thrash fan, and even by that standard, I think Megadeth is the worst of the big four. And
I agree with that.
But it's given where Dave Mustaine's politics are these days, that could be a very
disaster.
You know what? It'll do well on rock radio and will face the irrelevance that it deserves to get out of it. But hey, at least we're going to get new Lord, Spoon, and Wise Blood.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was like, at least we'll get Lord. And like, but it 2021. If Kendrick drops,
he will. If touring is available, he will drop. And I include touring not in the States because he can tour in Europe and make bank anyway. I hate to say it, but live music might take a long time to get back to the U.S.
Yeah, it will. It's unfortunate, but it will.
It's sad reality.
Yeah, and what do you think? What do you think Kendrick will have to say? That's the other thing.
I think Kendrick is going to be pretty forward-thinking, as he always is. I think a lot of his content is... I'm not going to make guesses on his content, given he's always had a peculiar angle with how he approaches the larger state of hip-hop. I think his sound could be very interesting, because he was flirting with a rock direction on Damn by including U2. And reportedly, he's integrating even more rock elements on this new album. The question of what type of rock elements could be very interesting, because especially as the rap rock thing is kind of becoming a thing in hip-hop and trap music right now. Right. So if that has more staying power and that lasted to 2021 and Kendrick is riding that wave, that could be a pretty huge release.
Yeah. Plugs.
All right, sure. If you want to find my channel, you can go to Spectrum Pulse on YouTube, where I upload semi-weekly surrounding regular album reviews, my series On the Pulse, also some solo album reviews. Coming up this year, I'm going into year-end list season, where I'll be talking about the worst hit songs of 2020, the best hit songs, my favorite songs, and my favorite albums of the respective year. I also have my side channel called Billboard Breakdown, where I go in at length every week surrounding whatever delinquent insanity is going on right now. Currently, this week up ahead, we've got Mariah Carey, who is taking the number one with All I Want for Christmas Is You. Likely she will be on this list for the biggest hits of the year, again, because of this number one placement. I have questions and problems with that, but that's a longer conversation.
Yeah, that's a long conversation for the recurrent.
Yep.
I was explaining to somebody the Billboard's recurrent rule, and they're like, "What?"
Oh yeah, it's going to be. It will be a thing because a lot of Christmas songs previously did not chart in their original release because the Hot 100 was very genre segregated throughout a long period of its history, and holiday music was just off in its own lane. But since they've decided to make it an all-genre chart, a lot of Christmas songs are only charting for their first time now. So when they then start qualifying for recurrent rules, I want to say in about 4 or 5 years, we'll see less of them, except for Mariah, who will go to number one until the end of time. If you're also looking to find me at Spectrum Pulse on Twitter, Instagram. I have my own personal website, also on Patreon if you want to help support my channel, and any specific albums that I review on, like any albums that you want me to review on my schedule, that's the way to do it. Also, for my own little brand of, I think the most polite word is called side ventures. I also have a TikTok at Spectrum Pulse, Only go there if you want the most inane and bizarre and idiotic of content.
You can follow me on Twitter at DJDCooks. You're already listening to Hard and Heavy. You can follow my podcast, Great Match Generator. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.